Hello everyone. Now we're doing session 15 and we're up to the teaching of spelling. So this is your text, and your text is coming from page 12, chapter 12, and it's difficulties with spelling. Sometimes people say you're either a good speller or you're not a good speller. And my experience is that you can learn certain skills in spelling to improve your spelling, but I must say some people do have a knack for being good spellers. Maybe you're a good speller and maybe you're not. So let's have a look at how we can teach spelling and then look at some remediation procedures. Now, my thinking is that there's a growing awareness how important spelling is, and it should be accurate and systematic. The thing that we like to encourage our children to be is strategic spellers. We can employ 3 principles in spelling, and that is direct guidance, scaffolding, and feedback. Perhaps the best practice in spelling involves teaching directly the essential skills and knowledge, teaching direct skills, and teaching strategies. Now, we've talked about direct instruction before, about direct teaching. This is where we model good spelling, good techniques to the students, where they imitate what we have been teaching them, that we give correct feedback, and that we give them lots of practice. And spelling needs to be taught in an authentic way for authentic writing purposes. If we're giving spelling lists of children that have no purpose and no meaning, we're actually going to turn them off spelling. So we need to teach efficient methods that are in context. We want students to know if a word is regular or irregular, and we want them to remember how to attack the spelling of unfamiliar words. Learning should not be left by chance, and it's very important that we encourage children to get it right the first time. We do know that if we get something wrong and we practice something being wrong, it takes 3 times the amount to overlearn or unlearn and learn the new word. And that difficulty can exist a long time if we get it wrong the first time. So let's try to teach spelling the right way. Now, the specific principles are that we should be allocating at least 15 minutes a day to the teaching of spelling. It should arouse the children's genuine curiosity, their interest in words. We should be teaching core vocabulary of common words, and we should be matching materials and activities to the student's age and stage of development. The teacher should give effective cognitive strategies for tackling words, things like proofreading, checking, and self-correcting, and making available tools in the classroom where children can take it upon themselves to check words, things like dictionaries, common core word lists, topic-specific words that we put on the chalkboard, electronic spelling checkers, or computer access. The best practice indicates that the teaching of spelling must take into due account the different stages of linguistic development, and teachers need to be aware of the different stages of a child's development. So stage 1 is that pre-phonetic, the invented spelling that we generally see in kindergarten years. Now, children will try and spell the words, and they might spell a word like dog or cat. They may make a few mistakes, but they're trying to work the words out. Now, stage 2, that's phonetic. It relies on the phonemic approach to letter sound correspondence. So children then start to learn that dog is D, O, G, and that it's made of D and O and G, and they like to then check that word, and there's a visual process involved. Now, the process involves building up an orthographic image in their memory, and that actually lasts in their memory. So when we do family groups like cat, bat, sat, rat, the children actually can see that there is consistency in that spelling. Now, stage 3 is the transitional approach, where we see words in words, and we can see there's letter strings. Things like STR becomes straight, strength, strong, and we start teaching the children to see those regularities. And of course, stage 4 is the independent stage, where we're looking at the flexible use of spelling, proofreading, self-help, self-correcting strategies. Now, spelling is a complex behaviour. We also know that it involves the coordination of hand, eye, brain, but also relies on correct pronunciation of words. Now, the strategies we need to teach spelling must be based on our 5 modalities. 1, auditory skills and phonetic knowledge. Do the children hear the difference? Do they know there's a difference between strong and straight? Secondly, visual skills. This involves the deliberate use of visual imagery, such as the look, say, cover, write, check approach. Let me just say that again. The look, say, cover, write, check approach. Let's see that again. The look, say, cover, write, check approach. Now, this is what teachers have found very helpful in teaching a child how to spell a word. Spelling by hand. As we know, spelling is a motor skill. We need to get children to write it, not just see it on a computer screen. Handwriting actually engages the brain and makes a memory in the child's learning. Let's look at pathways. If you're into neuroscience, you know about neurons and about cognitive pathways, and there are patterns, and our brain picks up patterns. So the spelling and the brain is really important. It's a cognitive activity, and the brain will make a decision how to encode the word. And of course, the 5th one is pronunciation. Accurate pronunciation is so important if a child is going to check the word. If a child is writing head instead of heap or heap or whatever, if they can't say the word head properly, then they're going to spell it incorrectly. I can remember my daughter had a card when she was about 6 years old, and the little boy had written, "I will love you forever," and he wrote the word ever, E-V-A. Now that's very the way he speaks. He hadn't actually understood that ever is different from ever. So what we need to do is to make sure that our children can speak correctly, and that's why in some of our schools we know the importance of a speech therapist. Most of our special schools do engage speech therapists for that very point, not just for learning how to engage in conversations, but also to speak correctly. And when we hear the word after we pronounced it properly, then we can accurately try and spell it. So let's look at some teaching strategies that we need to be aware of on a daily basis. Put time aside, 15 minutes every day for spelling. Use the look, say, cover, write approach. Use flashcards, and remember, our eyes are like a camera. Don't focus on scrambled computer games and unscrambling letters. That just confuses the brain. What we need to do is to apply a phonetic approach if the words are regular, but if they're not regular, then we need to approach it by a phonemic approach. Now, words families such as certain, uncertain, certainty, we can know that their word family is a phoneme. I would say a lot of you are familiar with spelling through Morphographics with Dixon and Engelmann as the publishers, and you may actually be using that in your classrooms at the moment. Spelling rules are important. The magic E is important. Teaching as many rules as you can. But if the child does not understand rules of spelling and finds that more difficult and frustration, don't persevere with it. Dictation is really important in developing listening skills and concentrating. And I have found that if you give the student the dictation passage beforehand, they'll be able to read it and then take it away and get them to write the dictation. They use their memory, they use their spelling, and they feel good about themselves afterwards because they've been able to encode the words. Spelling lists are important. They're important if they're tailored to the children's learning, and new vocabulary should always be displayed in the classroom so the children get it right the first time, so they don't have to unlearn it and then relearn it. Now, the goal of any spelling instruction program is that the students should be strategic spellers. They should firstly ask themselves, is this an irregular word or is this a regular word? Irregular words, we use the look, say, cover, write, check approach. Regular words, we sound it out. We need to teach the children the skill of syllabification. So the word caterpillar, pillar. That is sounding out the words, and the children can then pull it apart and do the letter sound correspondence. If we are into remedial spelling, this is an approach that I've found very helpful as well. The student should write a story, and the teacher then looks at the story and looks at the words that they systematically spell wrong. Look at those words, ask the student then to pronounce the words, and look at this. If there's a syllable, try and break into syllables. Get the student to name the letter and then write the right word while rehearsing it twice. This repeated writing of the correct word actually again sets up a pathway in the brain. There's another method called old way, new way, where we look at the corrected word, but we write it the correct way 6 times. And this is using 6 different colored pens. Again, making a pathway in the brain. I must stress that maintenance of words is very important. We can't just say, oh, we've taught it and that's it. We have to maintain this skill. And every 2 weeks, we should be revising these words that we've asked the students to correct. And of course, word sorting is really important. Giving children all these words and they're saying, could you put them into word families? I also think analysing students' work and having individual programs is very important. And I'd like to encourage you to think about when you are working individually with a child, that together you analyse their writing, that you help them rewrite the whole word correctly, that repetition and overlearning is really important, that the games that you choose and the activities reinforce spelling, not making jumbled up pathways in the child's brain. We must do this daily, and we must stress that spelling is not just an oral activity, it's a written activity, it's a brain activity, it's a motor activity, and all these things come together. I think it's a problem if we over-rely on computers and computer technology. It doesn't set up the same pathway, it's not the same cognitive process. Now, in your text, there are lots of online resources, and I know that the online resources are getting better and better, but let's look at programs that involve all of the modalities. Let's look at saying the word, pronouncing it properly, writing it properly, getting the child to cover it, write it by themselves, and check for accuracy. Friends, the teaching of spelling is really important. We want our children to feel confident at writing and not to introduce themselves as a poor speller, but to know that there are skills in spelling and that we are trying to encourage our students to be strategic spellers. And I'd say all the best with the teaching of spelling.